The morning sky above New York changed forever when the first ship appeared. Jake Morrison was drinking coffee in his office aboard the orbital station New Geneva when the alarms started screaming. Through the massive windows of the command center, he watched as something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric, and from that tear came a ship so large it blocked out the sun. Jake had been admiral of the Earth Defense Fleet for 3 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The alien vessel was black as space itself, stretching for miles in every direction. Its surface was smooth and featureless, except for strange patterns that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them. Within minutes, more tiers appeared in space above every major city on Earth. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi. All of them now had massive alien ships hanging in their skies like dark clouds. The communication came exactly 1 hour after their arrival. Dr. Lisa Harper was in her lab at the Global Research Institute when her computers began receiving the transmission. She was the best language expert humanity had, able to speak 12 human languages and decode patterns that others missed. But this was different. The alien message came not in words, but in pure meaning, flowing directly into her mind like water. The message was simple and terrible. The hegemony had arrived. Humanity was now part of their empire. Resistance was pointless. Surrender was required within 72 hours. Any attempt to fight would result in the complete destruction of human civilization. This was not a request or a negotiation. This was how things would be. Lisa felt sick as she understood the full meaning behind their words. To these aliens, humans were not people to be reasoned with. They were animals to be collected. The hegemony had done this before, many times, across many worlds. They had a system, and that system had never failed them. They would take Earth, process its people, and add another species to their collection. Captain Ryan Blake was leading a patrol mission near Mars when the orders came through. His ship, the Phoenix, was small and fast, designed for scouting and reconnaissance. Jake Morrison himself gave him the mission over a secure channel. Get close to the alien ships, learn what they could do, try not to get killed in the process. The fate of humanity might depend on what Ryan could discover. As Ryan guided his ship toward Earth, he could see the full scope of what they were facing. 12 massive vessels hung in orbit, each one larger than any space station humanity had ever built. They moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. Their weapons were hidden, but Ryan could detect enormous energy signatures coming from within their hulls. These ships could crack planets if they wanted to. Ryan brought his ship as close as he dared, using every stealth system the Phoenix had. What he saw made his blood run cold. The alien ships were not just weapons of war. They were mobile cities, each one containing millions of beings. But there was something strange about their design. Everything was standardized, perfect, identical. There was no creativity, no individual style. These ships had been built by minds that thought in patterns, not by souls that dreamed. Back on Earth, President Alex Carter was in an emergency meeting with leaders from every nation. The room was filled with the most powerful people on the planet, but they all looked like frightened children. The alien ships had not moved since their arrival, but their presence was crushing. Military satellites had tried to scan them and been gently but firmly pushed away. Fighter jets had been turned around in mid-flight by some invisible force. The aliens were not being hostile yet, but they were making their power very clear. Dr. Harper had spent the entire day analyzing the alien communication, breaking it down into smaller parts to understand how their minds worked. What she found was disturbing. The hegemony did not see humans as evil or good. They saw them as resources. Like farmers looking at cattle, they measured humans by their usefulness. The strong would be workers. The smart would be technicians. The rest would be disposed of efficiently and without emotion. Jake Morrison stared out at the alien fleet and tried to think of options. Earth had weapons, but they were designed to fight other humans. Nuclear missiles might scratch the paint on those massive ships. The orbital defense platforms could probably annoy them. The entire military might have. Humanity would be like throwing rocks at a mountain, but Jake had not become admiral by giving up when things looked impossible. Somewhere in those perfect, identical ships was a weakness. Ryan Blake would find it or die trying. Lisa Harper would crack their communication system and learn their secrets. Alex Carter would find a way to buy them time. And Jake would figure out how to kill something that could not be killed. The aliens had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. They thought this was generous. They had never encountered a species that needed more than a few hours to understand the hopelessness of their situation. They had conquered hundreds of worlds using this same method. Show overwhelming force, demand submission, collect the new subjects, move on to the next target. But the hegemony had made their first mistake. They had assumed that humans would react, like every other species they had encountered. They believed that when faced with certain death, all intelligent life would choose survival over freedom. They had never met a species that would rather die than kneel. The countdown had begun. In 71 hours and 37 minutes, humanity would have to give their answer. The aliens waited with the patience of gods, certain of the outcome. After all, this had worked 317 times before. They had no idea what they had just walked into. The city of Perth died in 3 seconds. Commander Kate Sullivan was running diagnostics on the Sterling Defense Laboratory when the sky lit up like a second sun. She had just enough time to activate the emergency recording systems before the energy beam hit the city center. 2 million people simply stopped existing, turned to vapor and ash in the blink of an eye. The shock wave that followed leveled everything for 50 miles in every direction. Kate survived because the laboratory was built underground, designed to withstand nuclear attacks. As the blast wave passed over them, she kept her instruments, running, recording everything the alien weapon did. The data was horrifying but also revealing. The energy beam was incredibly powerful, but it followed predictable patterns. It charged for exactly 47 seconds before firing. It required 17 seconds to recharge between shots. Most importantly, it seemed to fire on automatic systems, not manual control. President Alex Carter was in Washington when the news reached him. The aliens had not contacted Earth before the attack. They had simply chosen a target and destroyed it, like someone stepping on an ant to show their power. The message was clear. This was what happened to species that took too long to surrender. The 72-hour deadline had been reduced to 24 hours, but the attack had accomplished something the aliens did not expect. Instead of breaking human resistance, it had awakened something primal and dangerous. Every military base on Earth received the same order from President Carter within an hour of Perth's destruction. Prepare for Operation Last Stand. Humanity would not go quietly into slavery. Dr. Lisa Harper worked through the night, analyzing the energy signatures from the attack. She had realized something important about the hegemony during her study of their communications. They were not a single species, but a collection of different alien races working together. Each ship in their fleet contained multiple species, all serving different functions. The energy weapon that destroyed Perth had been operated by a species that thought in mathematical patterns, not emotional ones. Ryan Blake returned from his reconnaissance mission with intelligence that changed everything. The alien fleet was massive and powerful, but it was also predictable. Every ship followed the same patrol routes. Every weapon charged and fired using identical timing. Every defensive system responded to threats in exactly the same way. The hegemony had become so used to easy victories that they had forgotten how to adapt. Jake Morrison gathered his remaining fleet commanders in the war room aboard New Geneva. Earth's military forces were pitiful compared to the alien fleet, but they had advantages the aliens did not expect. Human tactics were based on unpredictability, sacrifice, and adaptation. The hegemony fought like a computer program, following patterns, and procedures. Humans fought like cornered animals, using desperation and creativity as weapons. The plan was insane, but it was the only chance they had. Every available ship would attack the smallest alien vessel simultaneously. Nuclear missiles, kinetic bombardment platforms, converted civilian spacecraft, even escape pods loaded with explosives. Everything that could fly would be thrown at a single target. The goal was not to destroy the entire enemy fleet, but to bring down one ship and learn their weaknesses. Kate Sullivan had discovered something crucial in her analysis of the Perth attack. The alien ships had powerful energy shields, but they operated on rotating frequencies. For exactly 3 seconds during each rotation cycle, the shields would be vulnerable to physical impacts. It was a tiny window, but it might be enough for a coordinated attack. The battle began at dawn on the 3rd day. Jake Morrison led the assault from his flagship, the New York, while Ryan Blake coordinated the smaller attack craft. They had every advantage of surprise, desperation, and fury. The humans came at the alien ship from every angle, using tactics that no computer program could predict. The aliens responded exactly as their programming dictated. Energy weapons charged and fired in sequence, defensive systems activated according to threat priority. Fighter craft launched in perfect formation. Everything happened with mechanical precision, and that precision became their weakness. The humans had studied their patterns and found ways to exploit every one of them. The cost was terrible. 3/4 of Earth's fleet died in the first 10 minutes of battle. Ships rammed alien fighters in suicide attacks. Pilots guided damaged vessels directly into enemy weapon arrays. Soldiers activated nuclear devices inside their own ships to create bigger explosions. The aliens had superior technology, but they had never faced enemies willing to die for victory. Kate Sullivan watched from the ground as human ships died by the dozens. But she also watched as her timing calculations proved correct. During those 3-second windows when the alien shields rotated, human weapons found their mark. Kinetic rounds punched through hull plating. Nuclear explosions damaged weapon systems. Slowly, impossibly, the alien ship began to take real damage. The breakthrough came when Captain Helen Wright guided her damaged destroyer directly into the alien ship's main weapon array. Her vessel had lost engines and life support, but the weapons still worked. She waited until the exact moment when the shields rotated, then fired every missile she had at point-blank range. The explosion tore a hole in the alien hull, large enough to fly a fighter through. Ryan Blake did not waste the opportunity. He led a squadron of fighters through the breach, firing at everything they could see inside the alien ship. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, filled with beings he did not recognize. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking crystals, still others like living metal. All of them seemed confused by the human attack, as if they could not understand why anyone would choose to fight instead of surrender. The alien ship finally died when Jake Morrison's damaged flagship collided with its command center. The admiral had evacuated his crew but stayed behind to guide the impact manually. 2 massive vessels crashed together in a fireball visible from Earth's surface. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the aliens had lost their first vessel in over 300 years. Dr. Harper was part of the salvage team that boarded the alien wreckage. What she found changed her understanding of their enemy completely. The alien crew had not died fighting. Most of them had simply shut down when their ship was damaged, like machines switching off when their power was cut. They had no experience with desperation, no understanding of sacrifice, no concept of fighting when victory was impossible. The prisoners they captured were even more revealing. Under questioning, the aliens expressed genuine confusion at human behavior. To them, the logical response to superior force was immediate surrender and cooperation. The idea of choosing death over slavery was incomprehensible. They could not understand why humans would destroy their own ships to damage enemy vessels. President Carter addressed the world that night from a bunker beneath Washington. Earth had lost most of its fleet and millions of its people, but they had proven something important. The aliens could be hurt. Their technology was not magic, their tactics were not perfect, and their will was not unbreakable. Humanity would continue to fight, no matter what the cost. The remaining alien ships maintained their positions above Earth's cities, but something had changed. For the first time in centuries, the hegemony had encountered real resistance. Their standard procedures had failed. Their overwhelming advantage had been challenged. And somewhere in the depths of their collective consciousness, doubt began to grow. Jake Morrison was dead, but his sacrifice had bought humanity something precious: knowledge. Kate Sullivan was analyzing every piece of alien technology they had captured. Ryan Blake was training new pilots in tactics the aliens could not predict. Lisa Harper was breaking their communication codes and learning their weaknesses. The war had truly begun, and neither side knew how it would end. The captured alien technology told a story that nobody had expected. Dr. Lisa Harper spent weeks analyzing the wreckage of the destroyed hegemony ship, and what she found changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemy. The aliens were not warriors who had conquered hundreds of worlds through superior military skill. They were bureaucrats who had absorbed civilizations through administrative efficiency. Colonel Sam Rodriguez led the salvage operations in the debris field, where the alien ship had died. His teams recovered intact computer systems, weapon components, and most importantly, several living alien prisoners. The beings they found were nothing like the terrifying conquerors humanity had imagined. They were technicians, administrators, and specialists who had no idea how to fight a real war. The first prisoner Sam's team captured was a creature that looked like a walking crystal formation. It spoke through harmonic vibrations that Lisa Harper's translation system could decode. When they asked it about military tactics, the being seemed confused. It explained that the hegemony had not fought an actual war in over 800 years. Every species they encountered surrendered immediately upon seeing their massive ships and superior technology. Dr. Eric Stone had been a military historian before the invasion, teaching courses about ancient human conflicts at the War College. Now President Carter had brought him in as a strategic advisor, hoping that lessons from human history might help against an enemy that had no history of real combat. What Eric discovered in the alien records was almost unbelievable. The hegemony's method of conquest was always the same. They arrived at a primitive world with overwhelming technological superiority, demonstrated their power by destroying something significant, but not crucial, then waited for the inevitable surrender. Every species they had encountered followed the same pattern. When faced with certain death, intelligent beings chose survival and cooperation. But humans were different, and the aliens could not understand why. The crystal being explained to Sam Rodriguez that fighting was illogical when defeat was certain. Resources spent on resistance could be better used for adaptation and integration into the hegemony. The concept of choosing death over slavery was literally incomprehensible to minds that had evolved to value efficiency over freedom. Lisa Harper made another crucial discovery when she decoded the alien communication logs. The hegemony was not a military empire, but a collection of species that had joined together for mutual benefit. Each race contributed their unique abilities to the collective, creating a civilization that was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly specialized. The warrior species that had originally created the empire had been extinct for thousands of years. The aliens currently running the fleet were descendants of accountants, engineers, and managers. They maintained the massive ships and powerful weapons, but they had no real understanding of how to use them in actual combat. Their entire military doctrine was based on intimidation rather than fighting. They had never needed to adapt their tactics because no one had ever forced them to. Eric Stone began developing new strategies based on this knowledge. Human military history was full of examples where smaller, more flexible forces had defeated larger, more rigid enemies. The key was to avoid playing by the enemy's rules and instead create chaos that their systems could not handle. Humans needed to fight a war that the aliens had never seen before. Kate Sullivan had been promoted to head of weapons development after her analysis of the Perth attack proved crucial to their first victory. Working with the captured alien technology, she began creating hybrid weapons that combined human creativity with alien power sources. The results were crude but effective, giving human forces tools that the hegemony's defensive systems were not programmed to counter. The real breakthrough came when Sam Rodriguez's interrogation team learned about the hegemony's command structure. The alien fleet was controlled by a council of specialists, each responsible for different aspects of the operation. Military decisions were made by committee, with every action requiring approval from multiple species. This system worked perfectly for administering conquered worlds, but it was disastrously slow for responding to changing battlefield conditions. Ryan Blake had survived the first battle and was now training new pilots in tactics that no alien computer could predict. Instead of fighting in formation like traditional military forces, human pilots learned to act like individual predators, using stealth, surprise, and sacrifice to achieve their goals. The aliens had programmed their defenses to counter organized attacks, not chaotic swarms of desperate humans. President Carter used this intelligence to plan humanity's next moves. Instead of trying to match the aliens in direct combat, Earth's forces would become something the hegemony had never faced before: a guerrilla army in space. Small, fast ships would strike at vulnerable targets and disappear before the aliens could respond. Underground bases would coordinate attacks while remaining hidden from the enemy's scanning systems. The aliens were beginning to realize that something was wrong with their conquest of Earth. The species they were fighting did not behave according to any pattern in their vast databases. Humans seemed willing to sacrifice everything for temporary tactical advantages. They used their own ships as weapons, turned civilian spacecraft into bombers, and fought with a creativity that no artificial intelligence could predict. Lisa Harper intercepted communications between the alien ships that revealed growing confusion and concern. Several species within the hegemony were questioning whether Earth was worth the resources being spent on its conquest. The loss of their ship had been more than a military setback. It had been a psychological shock that rippled through their entire empire. Dr. Stone's analysis of alien psychology provided crucial insights for the propaganda war that Lisa Harper was now coordinating. The hegemony species had been conditioned for centuries to believe that resistance was impossible and cooperation was logical. But if humans could prove that resistance was possible, other conquered species might begin to question their own submission. Kate Sullivan's hybrid weapons were beginning to show results in small skirmishes around the outer planets. Human forces had learned to use the aliens' own energy signatures against them, creating weapons that looked like random space debris until they activated. The aliens' sensors could detect these hidden threats, but their response protocols were too slow to counter them effectively. The war was changing from a contest between superior and inferior technologies into something much more complex. The hegemony had the better ships and weapons, but humans had the better understanding of how to fight. Every battle taught Earth's forces new ways to exploit alien weaknesses, while the aliens struggled to adapt their rigid systems to counter human unpredictability. Sam Rodriguez reported that the alien prisoners were becoming increasingly distressed as they learned more about human military history. The concept of wars lasting for years or decades was foreign to them. Their entire understanding of conflict was based on short demonstrations of power followed by immediate surrender. They had no idea how to fight an enemy that became more dangerous. The longer the war continued, Eric Stone realized that humanity's greatest advantage was not their technology or their numbers, but their experience with suffering. Every human culture had stories of heroic last stands, of people who chose death over dishonor, of victories won through sacrifice rather than superiority. The aliens had no such stories because they had never needed them. The hegemony had created a perfect system for conquering civilizations that thought logically about survival. But humans were not logical about survival. They were passionate about freedom, stubborn about principles, and willing to die for ideas that had no practical value. This made them unpredictable, dangerous, and ultimately unconquerable by an enemy that only understood efficient solutions. As the months passed, the war settled into a pattern that neither side had expected. The aliens maintained control of Earth's orbital space, but they could not land ground forces without facing constant attacks. Humans could not drive the aliens away, but they could make conquest so expensive that it became uneconomical. The question was whether humanity could outlast an empire that had existed for thousands of years, or whether the hegemony would eventually adapt to this new kind of war. 6 months after the fall of Perth, Captain Maria Santos was running a very different kind of war. Her command ship was a converted asteroid mining vessel called the Hammer, hidden deep in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around her, dozens of similar ships operated from hollowed-out rocks and abandoned mining stations, striking at alien supply lines and disappearing back into the darkness of space. The hegemony had learned to avoid direct confrontation with human forces after losing 3 more ships to suicide attacks. Instead, they tried to starve Earth into submission by cutting off all space traffic and destroying any vessel that left the planet's atmosphere. But they had not counted on humanity's ability to adapt and survive in the harshest environments. Maria's crew was typical of the new human space force. Half of them had been miners before the war, used to working in zero gravity and maintaining equipment with improvised parts. The other half were military volunteers who had learned to think like pirates rather than soldiers. Together, they had turned the asteroid belt into a maze of hidden bases and secret supply routes that the aliens could not map or control. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis was building a network that the hegemony could not comprehend. Each human base was designed to operate completely independently, with its own power sources, manufacturing capabilities, and communication systems. If one base was discovered and destroyed, the others would continue fighting without missing a step. The aliens were used to conquering civilizations by capturing their capital cities and command centers, but humanity had no center to capture. Paul's latest project was a base inside the asteroid Ceres, the largest rock in the belt. His engineering teams had spent months carving out tunnels and chambers, creating a facility that could house 10,000 people and build ships from raw materials. The base was invisible from outside, protected by layers of rock and ice that looked completely natural to alien sensors. Dr. Eric Stone had moved his strategic planning operation to a similar base inside the asteroid Vesta. From there, he coordinated attacks across the entire solar system using communication methods that the aliens could not intercept. Human forces had learned to use everything from laser pulses to gravitational waves to stay in contact, always staying one step ahead of the hegemony's attempts to cut their communications. The aliens were learning that fighting humans was like trying to catch smoke with their hands. Every time they thought they had located a major human base, they would find only empty tunnels and abandoned equipment. Every time they tried to predict human attack patterns, the humans would change their tactics completely. The war had become a contest between alien efficiency and human creativity, and creativity was winning. Sergeant Amy Taylor led one of the most successful raiding units in the belt. Her team specialized in capturing alien supply ships and communication relays, gathering intelligence that revealed the growing strain on the hegemony's resources. What they learned was encouraging. The aliens were using 10 times more fuel and equipment than they had planned for this conquest, and several member species were beginning to complain about the cost. Amy's latest prize was a hegemony communications hub that her team had captured intact. The intelligence it contained was beyond anything humanity had obtained before. For the first time, humans could see the true scope of the alien empire and understand how their unexpected resistance was affecting civilizations across the galaxy. The information showed that the hegemony was facing problems they had never encountered before. Other conquered species were asking questions about the war with Earth. If a primitive planet could resist the empire's might, perhaps the hegemony was not as invincible as everyone believed. Reports of unrest were filtering in from worlds that had been peaceful for generations. Kate Sullivan had moved her weapons development program to a mobile laboratory hidden inside a converted cargo ship. Working with materials salvaged from alien wrecks and resources mined from asteroids, her team was creating weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics. Their latest creation was a missile that could disguise itself as space debris until it was close enough to strike. The psychological warfare campaign that Dr. Lisa Harper was coordinating was having effects that reached far beyond the solar system. Human broadcasts were being intercepted by alien monitoring stations and transmitted throughout the hegemony empire. The message was simple but powerful. If humans could resist, anyone could resist. The concept of rebellion was spreading like a virus through civilizations that had forgotten what freedom meant. Maria Santos received new orders during a supply run to one of Paul Davis's hidden bases. Intelligence suggested that the hegemony was planning to bring in reinforcements from other sectors of their empire. If that happened, humanity's numerical disadvantage would become even worse. The time had come for a major offensive operation that would either cripple the alien fleet or destroy what remained of human space forces. The target was a hegemony shipyard that the aliens had constructed in orbit around Jupiter. The facility was massive, protected by dozens of warships and automated defense systems. It was also the key to the alien presence in the solar system, manufacturing replacement parts and building new vessels to replace their losses. If humans could destroy it, the aliens would be unable to maintain their fleet without supplies from their home worlds. Ryan Blake had been promoted to admiral after Jake Morrison's death, and he was now planning the most ambitious human attack since the war began. Every available ship in the asteroid belt would participate, along with converted civilian vessels and experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. The attack would be coordinated across multiple target points, designed to overwhelm the alien defense systems through sheer complexity. The plan was classic human warfare: ignore the enemy's strengths and attack their weaknesses. The shipyard was defended against major assault fleets, but it was vulnerable to the kind of chaotic, unpredictable attack that had become humanity's signature. Small groups of ships would strike from different directions, using tactics that no computer program could anticipate. Eric Stone had spent weeks analyzing the alien defense patterns around Jupiter. Like everything else about the hegemony, their security systems followed predictable routines. Guard ships patrolled in regular patterns, sensors swept according to programmed schedules, and weapons systems prioritized targets based on mathematical formulas. All of these systems could be exploited by an enemy that understood their weaknesses. Paul Davis coordinated the approach routes that would bring human forces to Jupiter without being detected. His network of hidden bases would serve as staging points, allowing the attack fleet to assemble in secret before striking simultaneously. The aliens would have no warning until human ships were already inside their defensive perimeter. Amy Taylor's intelligence about the shipyard's construction had revealed its most vulnerable point. The facility's main power core was protected by heavy shielding, but it required massive cooling systems that drew water from Jupiter's ice moons. If those cooling systems could be damaged, the power core would overheat and destroy the entire facility. Kate Sullivan had designed special weapons specifically for this mission. Her team had created charges that could be disguised as ice chunks, allowing human saboteurs to infiltrate the cooling systems without being detected. Once activated, the charges would create a chain reaction that would be impossible to stop. Lisa Harper had prepared a special broadcast to be transmitted during the attack. As the shipyard burned, every alien monitoring station in the sector would receive a message explaining that humanity would never surrender, never submit, and never stop fighting. The message would be accompanied by footage of the destruction, proof that even the hegemony's most advanced facilities could be destroyed by a species they considered primitive. The attack began at dawn on Jupiter time, though dawn and dusk had no meaning in the eternal night of space. Human ships emerged from the darkness like hunting wolves, striking at targets across the entire system. The aliens responded exactly as their programming dictated, but their responses were too slow and too predictable to counter the chaos that humanity brought to their perfect order. Maria Santos led her squadron directly at the shipyard's main assembly bays, firing everything she had at the massive construction cranes and manufacturing equipment. Behind her, converted mining ships rammed into alien defensive platforms, while fighter craft swarmed through the facility's superstructure like angry bees. The battle lasted 6 hours and cost humanity another third of their remaining fleet. But when the explosions finally faded, the hegemony shipyard was gone, along with half of their fleet and their ability to maintain their presence in the solar system. For the first time in their history, the aliens had been forced to retreat from a battle they had expected to win easily. The message was clear to civilizations throughout the galaxy. The invincible hegemony could be defeated. Their perfect systems could be broken. Their eternal empire could bleed. The war had been raging for 2 years when the first crack appeared in the hegemony alliance. Captain Steve Murphy was monitoring alien communications from his base hidden inside Saturn's rings when he intercepted a transmission that changed everything. The Zephyrian Council, one of the founding species of the hegemony, was formally questioning the continuation of the Earth campaign. Steve had learned the alien languages well enough to understand the nuances of their political discussions. The Zephyrians were not emotional beings like humans, but they were logical to an extreme degree. They calculated that the resources being spent on conquering one small planet could colonize 50 empty worlds. The war with humanity was becoming economically unsustainable. The intelligence reached Dr. Eric Stone's strategic command within hours. Eric had been tracking the political situation within the hegemony for months, looking for signs of discord that humanity could exploit. The Zephyrian statement was exactly what he had been hoping for, proof that the alien alliance was not as solid as it appeared. Admiral Ryan Blake was planning humanity's first major offensive operation when the intelligence about hegemony politics reached his flagship. Instead of another defensive action or guerrilla raid, he was preparing to strike directly at the aliens' remaining shipyard facilities in the outer system. The goal was not just military damage, but psychological impact that would accelerate the growing divisions within the enemy alliance. Dr. Kate Sullivan had spent 2 years reverse engineering alien technology, and her efforts were finally bearing fruit. Her latest creation was a hybrid energy weapon that combined human innovation with alien power sources. The weapon was crude compared to original hegemony designs, but it was also unpredictable in ways that alien defensive systems could not counter. The breakthrough had come when Kate realized that alien technology was designed for efficiency and standardization, while human technology prioritized adaptability and redundancy. By combining the two approaches, she could create weapons that were both powerful and flexible, capable of changing their operating parameters during combat. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis had expanded his network of hidden bases throughout the outer solar system. His facilities now included major installations inside asteroids, on the moons of gas giants, and even in the Kuiper Belt beyond Pluto. Each base was completely self-sufficient and capable of building ships and weapons from local materials. Paul's greatest achievement was the development of a manufacturing system that could convert raw asteroids into warships in a matter of weeks. The ships were not as sophisticated as either human or alien designs, but they were built specifically for suicide attacks and guerrilla warfare. They could be produced faster than the aliens could destroy them. Maria Santos had been promoted to Admiral of the Asteroid Fleet after her successful attack on the Jupiter shipyard. Her forces now numbered in the hundreds of ships, most of them converted civilian vessels or improvised warships built in Paul's hidden factories. They were not impressive individually, but together they represented a threat that the hegemony could not ignore. Maria's latest mission was to coordinate with rebel forces from other species that had been inspired by humanity's resistance. The first aliens to join the rebellion were the Karathi, a species that had been conquered by the hegemony over 200 years ago. They had been model subjects until human broadcasts reached their world and reminded them what freedom meant. The Karathi rebellion began with sabotage of industrial facilities and escalated to open warfare within months. The hegemony was forced to divert ships from the Earth campaign to deal with the uprising, weakening their forces in the solar system. More importantly, the rebellion proved that humanity's resistance was not an isolated incident, but the beginning of a larger movement. Dr. Lisa Harper had become humanity's chief diplomat, as well as their lead xenolinguist. She was now in direct communication with rebel groups across the galaxy, coordinating a propaganda campaign that was undermining the hegemony's control over dozens of worlds. The message was always the same. Resistance was possible, freedom was worth fighting for, and the empire was not invincible. Lisa's broadcasts were reaching species that the hegemony had considered completely pacified. The Altarians, who had not shown any signs of rebellion in over 500 years, suddenly began questioning their integration into the empire. The crystalline beings of Zerion, who had been loyal administrators for 3 centuries, started asking why they could not govern themselves. Steve Murphy intercepted communications showing that the hegemony high command was facing a crisis they had no precedent for handling. Their empire had been built on the assumption that conquered species would remain conquered once they understood the futility of resistance. The concept of a galaxy-wide rebellion triggered by one primitive planet was beyond their ability to comprehend. Eric Stone analyzed the political intelligence and developed a strategy that went far beyond military victory. If humanity could survive long enough, the hegemony empire might collapse from internal pressure rather than external force. The key was to keep fighting long enough for the rebellion to spread to enough worlds that the aliens could not contain it. Ryan Blake's offensive began with simultaneous attacks on hegemony facilities throughout the outer solar system. Human forces struck at supply depots, communication relays, and isolated ships with precision that the aliens had not expected from a supposedly primitive species. The attacks were coordinated across multiple light hours of space, requiring planning and communication abilities that challenged alien assumptions about human capabilities. The decisive engagement took place near Neptune, where Steve Murphy's intelligence had located a major hegemony command ship. The vessel was massive, containing the senior leadership for the entire Earth campaign, along with representatives from multiple alien species. Its destruction would decapitate the enemy command structure and force them to bring in new leaders from their home worlds. Kate Sullivan had prepared a special weapon for this mission, a missile that could penetrate the command ship's shields by mimicking the energy signature of a hegemony vessel. The weapon would appear to be a friendly ship on alien sensors until it was too close to intercept. It was a perfect example of how human creativity could overcome alien technology. The battle was humanity's greatest victory since the destruction of the Jupiter shipyard. The hegemony command ship was destroyed along with most of its escort fleet, dealing a blow to alien leadership that would take months to recover from. More importantly, the engagement was recorded and broadcast throughout the galaxy, providing proof that even the hegemony's most powerful vessels could be defeated. Paul Davis coordinated the follow-up operations that capitalized on the confusion caused by the destruction of the alien command structure. Human forces struck at targets across the solar system while the remaining hegemony ships struggled to reorganize without central leadership. Several alien vessels were captured intact, providing humanity with technology and intelligence that had previously been beyond their reach. Maria Santos led the operation that captured the most significant prize, a hegemony science vessel containing complete records of the Empire's administrative structure. The information revealed the locations of rebel groups throughout the galaxy and identified species that were most likely to join the growing resistance movement. Lisa Harper used this intelligence to coordinate the next phase of the rebellion. Direct communication links were established with resistance groups on 17 different worlds, creating a network that could coordinate activities across thousands of light years. For the first time, the galaxy had an organized opposition to hegemony rule. The aliens responded by recalling ships from other sectors to reinforce their Earth campaign, but this only accelerated the collapse of their empire. Worlds that had been peaceful for centuries erupted in rebellion as soon as their hegemony garrisons were reduced. The Empire faced a choice between maintaining control of their existing territories or completing the conquest of Earth. Eric Stone realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had not simply resisted conquest. They had triggered the collapse of an empire that had seemed eternal. The hegemony was learning what humans had always known, that some things were worth dying for and some fights were worth fighting even when victory seemed impossible. War was entering its final phase, but the outcome was no longer certain. The hegemony still possessed superior technology and vast resources, but they were facing enemies on dozens of worlds who had learned from humanity's example. The galaxy was choosing freedom over security, and that choice was changing everything. Steve. Murphy's latest intelligence intercepts showed that several hegemony species were considering withdrawal from the Empire entirely. The war with Earth had cost them more than ships and resources. It had cost them their certainty about their own invincibility. For beings who had built their entire civilization on the assumption of permanent superiority, that loss of certainty was more devastating than any military defeat. The final battle for Earth was approaching, but it would not be the simple conquest that the hegemony had originally planned. It would be a fight for the future of the galaxy. The final battle began when the hegemony committed their reserve fleet to one last desperate assault on Earth. Admiral Ryan Blake watched from the bridge of his flagship New Horizon as hundreds of alien ships emerged from hyperspace, more than had ever been assembled in one place during the entire war. The aliens had decided to end the rebellion by destroying its source, no matter what the cost, but humanity was ready for them. President Alex Carter had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, coordinating with rebel forces throughout the galaxy to ensure that Earth would not face the final assault alone. As the hegemony fleet approached, ships began appearing from every corner of the solar system. Not just human vessels, but craft from dozens of species that had joined the rebellion. Dr. Kate Sullivan had worked for months to prepare Earth's ultimate defense. Every asteroid in the belt had been converted into a weapon platform. Every moon in the outer system contained hidden missile batteries. Every piece of space debris larger than a baseball had been fitted with sensors and explosives. The solar system had become a massive trap waiting to spring. The Karathi arrived first, their sleek ships emerging from hyperspace near Mars. They had traveled across half the galaxy to join the battle, bringing with them technology that the hegemony thought they had forgotten how to use. Behind them came the Altarians, with their crystal ships that sang as they flew, and the mechanical warriors of Zerion who had rebuilt themselves into living weapons. Captain Steve Murphy coordinated the communications between all the rebel forces. From his command post hidden in Saturn's rings, he had learned to speak 17 different alien languages during the war, and now he was using all of them to coordinate the most complex military operation in galactic history. Ships from 50 different worlds were converging on Earth, each species bringing their own unique advantages to the fight. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis had prepared a surprise that the hegemony could never have anticipated. His hidden factories had been working around the clock for months, building not warships but massive decoy vessels that looked exactly like human dreadnoughts on alien sensors. When the battle began, the hegemony would think they were facing 10 times as many ships as humanity actually possessed. The deception worked perfectly. As the alien fleet approached Earth, their sensors detected what appeared to be thousands of human warships waiting in defensive positions. The hegemony commanders, already shaken by years of unexpected resistance, hesitated for crucial minutes while they tried to understand how a primitive species had built such a massive fleet. Those minutes gave Admiral Ryan Blake the time he needed to spring his trap. Human forces had learned to use the aliens' own psychology against them, creating patterns that looked like logical defensive positions but were actually designed to funnel the enemy fleet into carefully prepared kill zones. When the shooting started, every alien ship would be exactly where humanity wanted them to be. Dr. Lisa Harper had prepared one final broadcast for this moment. As the battle began, her voice reached every corner of the galaxy, speaking in dozens of languages to species that had dreamed of freedom but never dared to fight for it. She told them that today was the day when the galaxy would choose its own destiny, when the age of empires would end and the age of free peoples would begin. The battle was unlike anything that had ever been fought before. Human ships swarmed, the alien fleet like angry insects, using tactics that no military doctrine could counter. Karathi vessels danced between the massive hegemony ships, their pilots laughing with joy as they remembered what it felt like to fight for something they believed in. Altarian crystal ships focused starlight into cutting beams that sliced through alien hulls like paper. Maria Santos led the human fleet in a charge that broke every rule of space warfare. Instead of maintaining formation and fighting at long range, her ships closed to point-blank distance and engaged in the kind of brutal close combat that the hegemony had never experienced. Human pilots rammed their ships into alien vessels, detonated nuclear charges inside enemy hulls, and fought with a desperation that turned every engagement into a suicide mission. The aliens fought back with everything they had, but they're perfect. Formations and calculated strategies meant nothing against enemies who refused to follow any logical pattern. Hegemony ships were designed to fight other technological civilizations that valued efficiency and preservation of resources. They had no defense against opponents who would sacrifice everything for a moment's advantage. Kate Sullivan's hybrid weapons proved decisive in the battle's crucial moments. Her energy cannons could punch through hegemony shields by randomly changing their frequency patterns, while her guided missiles learned from alien defensive responses and adapted their attack methods in real time. The weapons were chaotic and unpredictable, exactly like the species that had created them. President Carter commanded the final phase of the battle from the heavily armored command ship Liberty. She had learned during 3 years of war that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat. As alien ships burned around Earth, she opened a direct communication channel to the hegemony high command. The message she sent was simple but devastating. The hegemony could withdraw from human space immediately and grant independence to all their member species, or they could face a war of extermination that would consume the entire galaxy. Humanity had proven that the Empire could be defeated, and now dozens of worlds were ready to follow their example. The alien response came from a being that Lisa Harper had never encountered before, one of the original founders of the hegemony, who had been awakened from stasis to deal with the crisis. It spoke in harmonics that conveyed emotions as well as words, and what it conveyed was something that no hegemony species had felt in thousands of years: fear. The ancient alien admitted what humanity had suspected all along. The hegemony had grown soft during centuries of easy conquest, forgetting that victory required more than superior technology. They had built an empire on the assumption that all intelligent life would choose survival over freedom, but humans had proven that assumption wrong. Eric Stone had spent 3 years studying alien psychology, and he understood what the founding being was really saying. The hegemony was not just facing military defeat, but philosophical destruction. Their entire civilization was based on the idea that resistance was futile and cooperation was logical. If that idea was wrong, then everything they had built was meaningless. The negotiation that followed was unlike any diplomatic contact in galactic history. Instead of the conquered pleading with their conquerors for mercy, it was the Empire asking for terms from the rebellion. The hegemony offered to withdraw from Earth and grant humanity independence in exchange for an end to the galaxy-wide uprising. But President Carter and the Rebel Alliance demanded much more. They wanted complete independence for every species. In the galaxy, the right of self-determination for all intelligent life, and guarantees that the age of conquest was over forever. The hegemony would have to transform from an empire into a voluntary association of free peoples. Dr. Lisa Harper helped draft the Treaty of Terra that established these principles in galactic law. The document was signed not just by human and hegemony representatives, but by delegates from 47 worlds that had joined the rebellion. For the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy had a government based on consent rather than conquest. The war ended not with humanity's defeat or victory, but with the transformation of galactic civilization itself. The hegemony disbanded as a political entity replaced by a confederation of free species that chose cooperation over domination. Humanity had not just won their independence, they had changed the fundamental nature of how civilizations related to each other. Admiral Ryan Blake led the first human exploration fleet beyond the borders of the former hegemony space, carrying with them the knowledge that freedom was not just a human concept, but a universal aspiration. They found worlds where species were taking their first tentative steps toward self-government, inspired by the example of a small planet that had refused to surrender. Captain Steve Murphy established the Galactic Communication Network that allowed free species to coordinate their activities and share information without central control. The network was based on human principles of redundancy and adaptability, ensuring that no single point of failure could bring down the entire system. Kate Sullivan founded the Institute for Cooperative Technology, where human and alien scientists worked together to develop innovations that benefited all species rather than just military applications. Her hybrid approach to engineering became the standard for galactic civilization, combining efficiency with creativity in ways that neither humans nor aliens could achieve alone. Paul Davis became the architect of the New Geneva Accords, which established the principles of interstellar law based on consent and cooperation rather than conquest and submission. His network of hidden bases became the foundation for a new kind of civilization that was decentralized, resilient, and impossible to conquer. Maria Santos led the Galactic Patrol that protected free worlds from the few remaining imperial factions that refused to accept the new order.